Welcome to Beyond the Paradigm. I'm Paul Breckel. My special guest today is Dr. Aaron Judkins. Aaron is an author, a film producer, and a biblical archaeologist, and he is best known for a film entitled Finding Noah. In this conversation today, we talk about New Earth creation, dinosaurs, and Noah's Ark. If you enjoyed this episode, could I ask you first of all to give it a like? And secondly, if you want to hear more content like this, you can subscribe to the channel. Dr. Aaron Judkins, for the first time, and welcome you onto the show to Beyond the Paradigm. It's good to have you on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So you're all the way in Texas, and I'm all the way over in the UK, but we managed to get this sorted out and get timings lined up and everything. So thanks for joining me. I know it can be quite difficult sometimes when there's that time gap, but just for my audience who, I know some of them are definitely going to be familiar with you, but just possibly for those who may not be familiar with you and your work, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be doing what you're doing now?
Sure. So my name is Aaron Judkins. I live in Glen Rose, Texas, and I have a passion for learning history, and so I began to volunteer at a little museum where I live locally called the Creation Evidence Museum. And because of that, that opened up some doors for me to go on some excavations. And so I was able to participate in some paleontology digs in Northwest Colorado in the States here. And then in 2004, I was invited to go excavate the Pool of Siloam in the old city of David in Jerusalem in Israel when they first discovered the initial steps. So I was on part of that team to do that. But just because of my passion for learning history and archaeology, I really I wanted to know more about, the archaeological evidence that confirms the scripture. And when I began digging into this, it really opened up a lot of, a whole new level of understanding, if you will, because it's not just about, when we're talking about the Christian faith, it's not just a blind faith that we hope is true. It is backed up by empirical evidence, scientific evidence. So, and archaeology is one of these fields that confirms the scripture. So for me, it was so exciting to be able to be a part of these projects.
Yeah, it's often like, one of the criticisms that sort of leveled at believers, oh yeah, but you've got faith, as if it's just like you said, like some sort of blind faith, and this, well, we just hope it's true. And I've said to people, well, no, I know it's true. And like you've said, there's empirical evidence for that, and archaeology is one of those areas which, backs up, like you said, affirms the scriptures. And now, obviously, the mainstream science teaches that the universe is millions of years old. And they say, that carbon dating is used, and they estimate the age of organic remains of archaeological sites. Now, I don't believe in millions of years. I'm a young earth creationist, but I'm not the researcher and the doctor you are. So could you debunk the sort of millions of years nonsense we hear the mainstream talk about, and sort of comment on how reliable this carbon dating is?
Okay, yeah, that's a very big question, but it's an important question because people often hear, when something comes out and they get a year from carbon-14 dating, and then they assume that date is correct because it is in published articles and in papers, and so the general public really doesn't understand that there's variables in carbon-14 dating. So up to a point, we can have some accuracy, but past several thousand years, the carbon-14 results become really skewed. Why do I say that? Because they have dated, say, for instance, a seal that's died on the beach. They know when that seal died. We know that it's just recently lived. And according to carbon-14 dates, these dates on this animal has come back millions of years old. There's a huge problem here with carbon-14 dating. While it can give us some estimates, these estimates are based on assumptions in the equation. So, for instance, you have to assume that the carbon levels are constant. And in most cases, they're not constant at all. These carbon levels have fluctuated throughout history. And then number two, you have to assume that the rate of decay is constant. So these are some assumptions in the equation of carbon-14. Even the inventor of carbon-14, which was, I believe, William Libby, was hesitant to say that carbon-14 was an accurate way to date organic material. So we have these assumptions in the variables that are unknown. And so we have instances of modern day organic material or samples being dated, but yet they come back millions of years old on the date, which is an erroneous result. So there are known problems with carbon-14 dating. So anytime you get when you're trying to date in the distant past, it doesn't really become a reliable method of dating because of these reasons. And so carbon-14 really is not a good way to measure how old something is. So they've tried to come up with other ways to date things to try to hone in on that. But you're right. There is a lot of problems with carbon-14 dating, and I don't use it as a sole reliable indicator of how old something is. It just doesn't pass the reality test when you date something that has just recently lived but has come back millions of years old. That's just one example. So I tend to not agree with the long age dates that carbon-14 gives because of some of these reasons. And we have to find other ways to figure out how old a particular thing is. And so it really becomes a challenge in science to address this. And so they've come up with ways to other dating methods to try to fill the gaps that carbon-14 has left.
Yeah, it baffles me really, because it's just another thing that people assume is true. It's on the mainstream media, and this such and such a thing, it's millions of years old, and it's just believed. What would you say to someone who says that like dinosaurs disprove the Bible?
Well, there's evidence that confirms that dinosaurs lived into the Middle Ages. I mean, they didn't call them dinosaurs in the Middle Ages. They referred to them as dragons. So I think there's a lot of good evidence that supports dinosaurs having lived up through the Middle Ages. We see these reports across the world in different cultures. It wasn't until 1841 that Sir Richard Owen coined the term dinosaur. So prior to that, they were known as dragons. And so we have a lot of dragon mythologies, if you will, in all these different cultures, Europe, Asia, and even here in the Native American cultures in the States have legends of dragons. So it's very interesting when this is all based off of presumptions. So none of us were there in the past to witness it, but you can test these theories. And so part of what I like to do is, bring these discussions to the table so people can make up their own minds. I don't really try to convince anybody of my way of thinking. I've been convinced by the evidence. And so I just like to present, some of these evidences that that I think are important. And some of them are circumstantial, but it's enough to question what we have assumed to be true, what we've been taught. And that's the important thing, is to just get you to critically think what you have been taught in the past, what you have learned, who you have trusted to tell you these things about where we came from. It's the four big questions of life. It's, who are we? Where did we come from? What is my purpose here? And where am I going? And so if you take a naturalistic presumption that we have evolved from what I call pond scum to Einstein, which is this evolutionary model that says we came from nothing, and then all of a sudden, we have this explosion of life that not just explains the human existence, but explains the entire universe. I mean, it's amazing to me when you look at it, and you look at life just on our planet, life in the sea, different life forms that we have, plants. They all have a symbiotic relationship. I mean, we have to have bees and bats to pollinate, and that's important for our food production. Without the bees, we don't have that. We have to have these symbiotic relationships. We have to have the sun in order for photosynthesis to occur. We have to have plants and trees for our survival. So there's a lot of symbiotic relationships and design in nature, in the creation. So this whole evolutionary concept of a distant past where we have just no understanding of how we got here is erroneous. So if you read the logical conclusion of this, it says that we came from nothing. We have no purpose here. We have no hope. We don't know where we're going. We don't know who we are. And when we die, that's it. There's really no story there. I mean, it provides no answers. It provides no hope of why we're here. The other side of that story, and there's only really two views of this, is we came from nothing and evolution is true, or we're here for a reason. We're here for a purpose. And that reason is explained by the creation in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, that we have a hope, we have a future, we're here for a reason and a purpose. And then when we die, we have a purpose of where we're going afterwards. This isn't it. This physicality is not it. There is a spiritual part to us. So when you going back to your point, were dinosaurs around? Does the Bible point to that? The answer is yes. The Bible points to dinosaurs. Why? Because they were created on day 6 with the rest of the terrestrial land animals. Dinosaurs were a part of that. and God called them good. I mean, this is a part of the creation, and we see evidence of dinosaurs. I mean, I've dug out probably 15 different dinosaurs, um, and um, and we can find their bones in the ground. They were huge creatures, but they had a purpose here on the earth. So when you put, the evidence together about dinosaurs, um, there's a lot of evidence to say, yes, they were here, they lived, just like the Bible said. As a matter of fact, we're in the Creation Evidence Museum here in Glen Rose, Texas. We have a bone lab, a microscopy lab that is some of the cutting edge research in soft tissue in dinosaur bones. And you may have heard about this, but we're actually kind of leading that scientific endeavor in soft tissue research in dinosaur bones. And we just had a Ian Juby here from Canada, and he had a little triceratops bone from a triceratops horn that we sliced, and we put it under the microscope, and we found remnants of collagen and red blood cells. So, and this is a dinosaur bone that's supposedly 70 million years old. So there's a big problem here with what we're finding in the field empirically, scientifically, and then what we've been told, that there's this disconnect of millions of years between dinosaurs and humans. There's a lot more to that story, but that's the essence of what we're doing now. Is the scientific research doesn't seem to match the story what we've been told about these dinosaurs living millions and millions of years ago.
Yeah, it's like the dragon thing, like you said, the word dinosaurs from the 1800s. And
Yeah.
I mean, from my home country of England, the actual patron saint of England is Saint George, and who was said to have slayed a dragon.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
and where I live now in Wales, their actual national flag has a red dragon on it. So, it's like the giants, the stories are everywhere about these creatures. And I've said to people, it's like regarding China, for example, they have the year of the dog, the year of the monkey. Are we supposed to believe that all these years are real creatures and they have one fictional creature, which is the dragon? Well, I've said, well, no, they're all real creatures. It's just that the word dragon is now replaced by the word dinosaur. And like
Yeah.
you said about evolution, and that it's like hopeless, but we know that out of nothing comes, and that if there ever was a time when there was nothing, then there would be nothing now.
Yeah, that's called the law of biogenesis, by the way. The law of biogenesis says that life has to come from life. Life cannot come from non-life. So when logically, if you run this backwards, evolution says that we came from a rock. And then where did the rock come from? Well, we don't know, but there was some kind of gases, and then, something happened and that all exploded into order. Well, it doesn't pass the observation test. It doesn't pass the reality test. When you go out in your, say, here in Texas, we have a lot of space, right? But if I go out in my backyard and I blow something up, it's not going to become anything. Like I can set things up, right? I can set all the molecules and the proteins and the amino acids, and I can put everything in there that's needed for life, and then just blow it up, and it's not going to be anything. In other words, the law of entropy, which is a physical law of the universe, says that things go from order to disorder. They don't go from disorder to order. It always goes from order to disorder. And this is true. We age, our cars break down, things break over time. We have, things rust, right? They don't improve. nothing ever improves by itself. You have to have some kind of intervention for something to happen to make it better. This is against the natural order of law that we see in the universe. Things just don't create themselves and become something. Not only something, they don't create a whole universe of things. I mean, we have to have these relationships set just right. There's a very delicate balance of life. And there's a big issue right now with carbon, right? With carbon footprint. How big is your carbon footprint? How big is our the carbon emissions? This is all happening now, but the Earth, has a natural cycle of this. I mean, humans have played just a minor role in a carbon footprint, if you will. The oceans and the sun has a big role in that. So there's natural causes that have ebbed and flowed throughout history, but it's definitely one that I think is it's become politicized, at least here in the States. But there's natural explanations to how the Earth works. And when you look at the universe, we just had a big solar eclipse here that just came right over us just back on April the 8th. And it's just amazing. It's an amazing reminder that there's order in the universe. Now, it's a mathematical thing. The moon blocks the sun, and we had about 3.5 minutes of totality. And it really got dark. I mean, it was amazing. No camera, no video can really capture that moment. You just have to experience it for yourself. It was incredible. You can immediately see Jupiter and Mars just right when that happened. It was just instant darkness for 3.5 minutes. It was amazing here. But there's order and there's design. And if there's design in the universe, there has to be a designer behind that. There has to be an intelligence that's transcendent beyond anything that we can see, hear, feel, or touch or taste. It's beyond our 5 senses. It's beyond our 4 dimensions of length, height, width, and time. It's beyond that. So this intelligence is something that the Bible has named very specifically in Scripture in the book of Genesis. And that is the creator God of the Bible. This is the person who created all this, and so it's an amazing thing, because science is just not catching up to all these amazing things that we were discovering in science.
Yeah, the Bible is obviously, it's an amazing book. People who criticize it, I just often say to them, well, have you ever read it? Well, no, of course I haven't. Well, maybe read it then before you say anything. Now, obviously, we've talked about evolution and, sort of an argument against that. But what would you say to someone who was like an old Earth creationist who's a proponent, say, of the gap theory? Because I have had guests on here who are believe in the gap theory. I'm reading a book at the moment called Earth's Earliest Ages by G.H. Pember, obviously from the Plymouth Brethren. It's a good book, but he's a proponent of the gap theory and an old Earth creationist. What would you present to someone like that to maybe make them think that they might be wrong?
Yeah, well, I was, part of my background is I was a Christian at an early age. And so I grew up being a Christian. I mean, I was saved at an early age. I just accepted by faith through grace that what the Bible said was true. And, I came to faith as like the Bible says, as I was, but as a child. I mean, I had no understanding of the advanced concepts of any of this that we're talking about now, but it doesn't matter. Any child can tell you, if you ask them, if there's intelligence, if there's design, if there's a God. There's just, you have to, I think you have to be taught and swayed as you get older to change your mind that there isn't a God. But for me, I grew up in this, but the point is, I was taught in public school, I was taught evolution. So I had this, I had my faith that God had created everything, and I believed that. But I was being taught in public school that we evolved, and I couldn't reconcile the two, because here I was being taught, that we came from, from what I call the Pond Scum to Einstein, that we evolved over millions of years into now Homo sapiens sapien, which is the technical term for that, over just the last couple of 100,000 years. But for me, I've had to change my stance because I wanted to know more. I wanted to challenge. I mean, they don't call me the maverick archaeologist for anything. I mean, I've challenged the status quo, and part of that is just asking questions, digging in for myself, learning. I wanted to know, was there more? And as I began going out into the field and excavating, I mean, I've been around the world. I've been a part of some amazing excavations around the world. And what I've learned was that a lot of times the field evidence doesn't match what we've been taught out of the textbook. And that's true with anything that you look at, pretty much. It's true for the fossil record, geology, archaeology. So to me, it made me question. But as I began to realize that the evidence is not matching up with what I'd been taught, I had to change my viewpoint that, okay, well, evolution's not true, but there's no millions of years in the gap, what you're referring to as the gap theory. Now, I have a lot of friends and colleagues who believe in the gap theory. They're Christians, and they believe in the fundamentals of the faith. But they do believe that there's millions of years, and that's where you put all the dinosaurs and everything back in the gap. There's a gap between Genesis verse 1 and verse 2. Now, I don't think that's true because of several things, and I'll just reference them here. But there's 7 theories of life origins. There's an atheistic theory, and I'm just going to glance over here on my computer as I talk to you about this. But there's the atheistic theory that says, I don't believe in anything, that there's nothing out there, and so that's it, right? The second theory is called the theistic evolution theory of life origins, which includes the Big Bang. It interprets the book of Genesis allegorically, and it says God used evolution to create life. The third theory is the progressive old earth creation theory, and this says long ages of time. Through the geological process, there's long ages of time. God created life in stages throughout history. So there was a creative event, and then there was this kind of stages where there was punctuated equilibrium. So evolution happened in stages. The fourth theory is the gap theory, and this is the gap between Genesis verse 1 and verse 2 is what they claim, that the dinosaurs, the long ages are inserted into that. The fifth theory is the day age theory, which says that the 6 successive days in which God explained the creation event to Moses and what he had done, but not when he had done it. So that's the revelation day theory. And then the 7th is the young earth creation theory, which is now the position I hold to personally as well. It's a literal 6-day creation event using a 24-hour day. So why have I changed my mind on this? Because of a lot of study, a lot of field experience, and the evidence, of course. And here's what the evidence shows: the preponderance of the evidence for a young Earth. And I'm going to give you these quickly. The first is the geological column. Now, evolution teaches that there is a geological column of 12 major strata that lasted millions of years. Okay, each one's lasted millions of years, and one came after the other, and then all the fossils were laid down during that time. But only 15% of the Earth's land surface shows 2 to 3 layers of the geological column in the right order. Now, most people don't know that, but anywhere in the world you wish to go, most of the strata are missing. So it'll be in the textbooks, but it won't be in real life in observation, the observation test, as I call it. When you can go out and look at it, it's not there. The classic evidence of this is the Grand Canyon in the United States. The Grand Canyon has a layer called the Cambrian Mojave layer. It's supposedly 200 million years old. This Cambrian Mojave layer is intermixed with the Mississippian Redwall Formation. So, which is supposed to be a whole separate layer in millions of years, yet they're intermixed together. And so we see that several of these layers that are supposed to be in the Grand Canyon, I mean, it's a mile deep. They all should be there according to the textbooks, but they're not. Several of them are missing. They're not even there. So the Grand Canyon is one. We have the complexity of the cell. The living cell is very complex, and really it defies all evolutionary explanations. For instance, a minimal cell contains 60,000 proteins of 100 different configurations. This is researched in Michael Denton's book, Evolution: A Theory in Crisis, if you want to learn more. But the chance of assembling this protein in a cell is 1 in 10 to the 4,478,296. It's just impossible for this to happen. So the complexity of the cell is, as a matter of fact, you take one component out of the cell, and it doesn't matter. You could pick a ribosome, a Golgi body, a mitochondria, whatever, a nucleus, whatever you want to. That cell, the cell in your body, that cell ceases to die. You take one component out, that cell dies. So we're talking about preponderance of a young Earth. Why I believe in a young Earth. The third part of that would be genetic confirmation. Now, it's interesting that geneticists have done mitochondrial DNA studies, and it's pretty interesting that in some of the genetic research has come out, they say that all sheep and goats have originated from 5 original sheep and goats. It's interesting that the Bible talks about the animals went on the ark by 2 of the unclean, but most people don't know that the clean animals went on by 7s.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens when Noah and the animals got off the ark, God commanded him to sacrifice 2 of those animals as a burnt offering after they come off the flood. And so now we have gone from the 7 sheep and goats down to 5 originals, which is shown in the only leaving 5 to repopulate the earth. So this is genetic studies that have really revealed this this type of results in the current research. It is, I think, fascinating to also know that in the human mitochondrial DNA, which is only passed down through the females, so the females to their mother, to their mother, to their mother, all the way back, they have, when they recalibrated the genetic clock for this, they basically trace it all the way back to what they have called mitochondrial Eve. And mitochondrial Eve, when they recalibrated the clocks for mitochondrial Eve, they got a date. Now, this is their date, 6,000 years old. 6,000 years. So this is going back to one of the original ancestors, they say, that's passed down through the mitochondrial DNA, which is fascinating. That timeline is agreeable with the biblical timeline of about 6,000 years. Fourth is the global flood, the preponderance of a young Earth. Why do I believe that? Well, the global flood, in most academic circles, the global flood is interpreted within a evolutionary linear model. The Bible clearly describes a global flood in Noah's day in the book of Genesis, but there are hundreds and hundreds of flood traditions that are connected around the earth. We see different cultures separated by time and distance, yet most cultures around the earth have a flood legend, if you will, this flood story. Now, they may have a different Noah and a different boat. The stories change up a little bit, but the central theme of this is that there was a global flood. So we see that there was a loss of atmospheric pressure when the flood happened. We can see it. We can study it in geology, and we basically get our limestone. That's a sedimentary rock. This limestone is laid down underwater, and it was basically this limestone goes all the way around the earth. You have these huge calcium deposits over in the high cliffs of the White Cliffs of Dover.
Yeah.
I don't know how thick those are, hundreds of feet thick, I think. But this is all calcium kind of lime deposits that's embedded into those White Cliffs of Dover there. But it's basically when you have the Earth's when you have the Earth flooding globally, you have underneath. If we could take all the water out of the oceans and look at it, there would be something called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge that's under the oceans. These are mountain ranges that are higher than Mount Everest under the oceans, and this Mid-Atlantic Ridge is it's like a scar on the Earth. If you can think of it like a baseball seam that goes around the baseball, this Mid-Atlantic Ridge is basically geologists say that this thing formed in about 2 minutes. It just ripped around the earth like if you cracked an egg. This thing ripped around the earth. It released waters from the great deep that jettisoned up into the stratosphere about 200 miles. And so we have the floods coming from above, and then the rain coming down from below. And so it was a huge destruction that happened. We see it in the geological record. Sedimentary limestone forms underwater. If you're driving down the road and you're going through a road cut, next time you do that, look at the sides of the mountain or the hill you're going, because a lot of these layers kind of go in parallel like this. You can see them like this. These layers are ebbing and flowing. That's because they were laid down underwater. So you can go anywhere in the earth and see these layers. They're bent, they're rolling, they're all parallel. Some of them are going like at odd angles, right? We have dinosaur tracks in Bolivia that are going up a side of a cliff, but we know that dinosaurs didn't walk on the side of the cliff. No, this was laid down flat, and then this got jettisoned upward at some time later, which tilted all that strata up. So we have bent and folded strata. We have strata that's parallel, but it's all it's all evidence of a global flood. So we see that we see fossil trees in Yellowstone, ancient forests buried. We see polystrate fossils that are buried, trees that are buried through millions of years of time of layers of geological rock. But we know trees don't live millions of years old. So there's a lot of questions here, but the evidence of a rapid formation of the Earth's sedimentary deposits are this: parallel layers, uniform thickness, absence of vertical erosion cuts, meteorites in only the top layers, not in the bottom layers. That's because they're not millions of years old. Absence of past vegetation in between the layers. We have polished straight fossils. Where I talked about the trees going through multiple layers of rock that are supposedly millions of years old. We have a cataclysmic and rapid burial that produces fossils. Now, when a cow dies out in the pasture here in Texas, it doesn't turn into a fossil. Why? Because fossilization has to have several things for it to occur. It has to have it has to have rapid burial. You have to have pressure, heat, and time. And only with those ingredients, if you will, to come together, it can only turn into a fossil. It just doesn't turn into a fossil from natural causes. It has to have a rapid burial, pressure, heat, and time. Mount St. Helens is a recent confirmation, 1980, in Washington. Mount St. Helens blue. We knew the conditions before Mount St. Helens. We knew the conditions during and after. Now, they call a canyon that was formed about 6 hours after Mount St. Helens exploded. There was what they call the mini Grand Canyon formed in about 6 hours after Mount St. Helens exploded. So we see that just on a kind of a miniature scale, if you will, about what happens when you have a lot of water that just comes through, and that was carved out by as a result of Mount St. Helens. And then we have these intercontinental sedimentary layers of limestone we talked about that are upwards of 1,500 feet thick. I talked about the fossil record. That would be one. And then soft tissue and dinosaur bones. We talked about that earlier. By the way, that's all published. This evidence has been published in scientific papers, and there's current publications of soft tissue and dinosaur research. So it's not old, although Dr. Mary Schweitzer kind of broke it back in the late 90s, I think perhaps 1999. And then in the early 2000s, 2004, 2005, et cetera. But this is ongoing research and new published articles and materials out there. So these are just a few examples. I could go on, but I think I've made my point. This is a preponderance of evidence for a young Earth. And so that's why I've, years ago, about 30 years ago, I changed my mind on all that.
Yeah, you mentioned there, obviously, you've got friends who are like old Earth creationists, and we know it's not a salvation issue.
Right.
You know, they believe, obviously, that God created everything, but for whatever reason, they try to fit in this gap or whatever. I mean, I've been a young Earth creationist as long as I've been a Christian, because that's what I was taught. But like you said, there is a preponderance of evidence. Like, I like to challenge myself. Like you said, you like to ask questions, and I like to ask questions, and I like to ask questions of why do I believe this? And I've not read anything that's sort of swayed me on against New Earth creationism. Everything that I've read indicates that that's the correct position. And like, obviously, you said you change your mind and you believe that as well. Looking at the time now, some of the questions I wanted to ask you, I don't want to rush through them.
What else you got?
Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Göbekli Tepe, but I didn't really want to just rush through it in about 10 minutes, to be honest. One of me, I'll go to my final question, because it's not about Göbekli Tepe. So, what about Noah's Ark? Do you think Noah's Ark's still on Earth? What's your thoughts on that? Because obviously there's a lot of people say, you know, we've found Noah's Ark, and other people say no. You know, I've heard all kinds of stories regarding that they found it, they haven't found it, the reasons why it's probably not here, the reasons why it is.
Okay, yeah, that's a big question. All right, Noah's Ark. So in 2013, I was part of an expeditionary crew that climbed Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey to try to locate it. Now we converged a lot of evidence at the time that we had to either confirm or prove that there was a superstructure on Greater Ararat. The it's in a film called Finding Noah. It should be available on Amazon. If you're interested in the DVD, you can. I'd be glad to send you a DVD. You'd have to pay for the DVD and the mail, but I could send you one. I still have some copies, but it's available on Amazon. It documents our trip up Eastern Turkey. Now, I think yes, the Ark still exists, and I think it's on that mountain. I think it's on Greater Ararat in Eastern Turkey. There's still areas on the mountain that have not been ruled out. Amazingly enough, it's not been ruled out yet. It's so difficult. If you see the film, you'll understand. Geopolitically, it's very difficult region. There, whether it's you have a very narrow opportunity to even climb the mountain to go find it. And then the anytime after August, it's so difficult. Just the ice and the snow, the storms that hit that mountain, and then geopolitically the tensions. What if you see Finding Noah? What you're not going to see is that the truce between the PKK and the Turkish military broke while we were on the mountain. Half of our team got captured by the PKK at gunpoint. Wow. And I was still up on the summit when all that happened, but the director of the film, Brent Baum, and several of our guys were taken captive, and they were taken to a PKK general who demanded a lot of money. Wow. And I'm talking a lot of money. This is before ISIS was trying to push into Turkey. And but I do believe that there is evidence that Noah's Ark still exists on that mountain, and there's still ongoing efforts by others to try to pinpoint that. I think if it's anywhere, it's on that mountain. Now there's all other locations that you had talked about, other locations like the Darupanar site that has kind of this triangle shaped boat picture that everybody sees, and it's this ever living thing on the internet. I get this all the time. People send me things. They found Noah's Ark, and it's the Darupanar site. I don't think that's it. Now I know the guy that's been kind of leading that up over there, and we have agreed to disagree on that. He knows my position. I know his. Look, go at it. I hope you find it. I mean, if it's there, that's great. I'm not dogmatic about it, where I think it is. I just think it's there because of certain reasons, but I don't happen to believe that the Darupanar site is Noah's Ark. It has a general shape, a diamond shape. It's about the same length, but look, when you look at it and you kind of zoom out in the overall region, this is just a naturalistic geological mud flow is what geologists have claimed it was. I mean, they've looked at this since the 80s. And so independent geologists, archaeologists alike have gone out there. I went out there and looked at it in 2013, and I agree with them. It's a naturalistic mud flow and there's several of these on the mountain on that hillside. But this is 25, 30 miles away from Mount Ararat. This is it's in the region, but it's far enough away. But I don't think that's the site. Now, I have, if you go to my website, aaronjudkins.com, I've written a paper that talks about it's called Darupanar Debunked. And it talks about some of the initial claims that Ron White made about this site back in the 80s. You can also find it on academia.com. It's called Darupanar Debunked, or you just type in my name. It'll pop up, and I'll type out all the reasons why in that paper. But I happen to believe it's still on Mount Ararat. Now, there's other alternative sites. There's a mountain in northern Iran. There's another one in southern Turkey. There's other sites that people have claimed where Noah's Ark is. I think it does exist. I think it will, I think it'll be eventually found. That's just my personal opinion. But look, if it's found, you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to do something with that. And I'm talking about like independently confirmed and verified by others that this is it. There's no debate about it anymore. That here it is. We found it. Okay, so let's just say that this has happened. For those who believe already and have faith that the Bible's true, and God is real, and He has put us on this planet for hope and a reason, right? That we talked about earlier. Well, for us, okay, that's great. It may embolden our faith. It may strengthen it. Do we need it? No, we don't need it. We don't need it to believe. It's not crucial to our faith. We don't have to have it. But what about a person who says, okay, I haven't ever believed that, but now here it's confirmed by other researchers independently, archaeologically, this is it. Well, you're going to have to do something with that information. You're going to have to either choose to accept it, this is true, but then contemplate, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for your belief? Because if that's true, that means that that story in the book of Genesis that you haven't read because you thought it was a myth or a fable, now all of a sudden becomes truth. And then you're going to have to do something with that truth. Because if that truth was real historically, which means the rest of the thing that's written out is probably also true, and there's confirmation in the archaeological record to bear out a lot of the historical narrative that's found in the scripture, in the Old Testament and the New Testament. I mean, we're talking things that have been verified in the archaeological record that these people, places, and events have occurred in the scripture. And I'm talking about people who have been not necessarily professed a Christian faith. I'm talking like an agnostic researcher like David Roll, who's an Egyptologist, who basically has written books on this, and to say, look, the thing in the book of Genesis actually happened. There's evidence for the Hebrews in Egypt. We see these things archaeologically. You just have to dig in and read this, look for it. The patterns of evidence films, if you're interested in these films, lay it out visually for you. But it's wonderful to see that there's evidence that confirms what we believe and why we believe it. So I believe that the art does exist. I believe that it will be found at a future date, but you're going to have to do something with that information. You're going to accept it. I guess the question is, are you going to accept it or are you going to reject it? So there's three camps. One, it will embolden your faith if you already believe. Two, you reject it and you say, I have my mind made up already. I'm not going to believe it no matter what the evidence shows. Or three, you're going to have to change your mind and your position and reconsider. It's all I'm asking really is reconsider if that's true, dig in a little bit more, find out what else has been found archaeologically in the Bible, find out what has been confirmed. Now I'm not talking about just archaeology. What's your interest? Is it deep space and time? I mean, we just had this big, solar eclipse here. I got to meet astrophysicist Barry Setterfield, who studied a lot on this. And, he brings up a lot of evidence about deep space and time. And what he told me, I just saw him a few weeks ago. What he told me directly was that universe is finite and time is finite. So if the universe is finite, that means it has a point of origin. But where science stops at the most, at where you cannot measure anything scientifically anymore. That's where science stops, right? So the smallest unit of measure that we scientifically can get is called Planck's constant. Planck's constant. That's the smallest amount of energy or matter that can be measured. Then after that, then you get into philosophy and theology about the origins of the universe. And this is where a lot of the science can't answer the questions about who we are, where do we come from, why are we here, what is our purpose here, because they have no other foundation to answer these questions. And so there's a gap in their understanding about this. If you simply take what the Bible has said, that there is a God, he did design all this for our purpose, and that we have a hope and reason that after we die, and if we accepted what he did on this planet for us, then we have a hope in a future with him in eternity. That's what this whole thing is about. It's just about a personal relationship with Christ, Jesus Christ. It's not about a religion. It's about a personal relationship with your creator. And he designed all this for us, for our benefit. So find out what it is that you love to do. Find out your passion. What are you interested? Are you interested in geology or fossils or dinosaurs? Dig into that a little bit more. There's all kinds of references and resources. I mean, I got a whole library here. I've read thousands of books in my life. I've written books. There's references that you can have if you just take time to read a book, listen to a podcast, watch a video, however it is that you want to learn. There's source material out there that confirms all this. So I just think it's fascinating that we live in a time that our understanding is increasing in all this. And then as we explore more, we're finding more evidence that there's design in the universe. And if there's design, there's the designer behind that. And that's, I think, the most important thing. We know who the designer is. It's not just this question mark, and it's not aliens. It's the God of the Bible. And if you simply just take the time to look at it, read it, and then look at material and references about it, it's amazing. That book on Göbekli Tepe we're talking about, and I guess we'll have to talk about that another time. But I reference a lot of these things in that book. So you have a foundation, a foundational understanding about my conclusions about Göbekli Tepe. So I get into carbon-14 dating. We talked about that earlier. I list all the references for that we talked about. I talk about the Ice Age, and I list all the references. And a lot of these are not just Christian references. They're secular academic references in the book that you can follow, such as the reversal of the Earth's magnetic field. And then we talked about Göbekli Tepe, but I also talk about the sedimentary rock and the limestone. So it's all in there. The worldwide flood. There's evidences for this, and it's all referenced in the book. But there's a lot of things that you can study. If you just studied that alone, if you just picked up that book and followed the references, you would get a library of educational content that would just be at your disposal, that you could go study for yourself. So I think it's great.
It's fascinating stuff, Aaron. You know, I love this stuff. I wish I had more time, but just thank God for men like you who go out and spend the time, and you get out into the field, and then obviously you bring back your research and you write books and everything. Definitely want to get you back on the show to obviously go in more about the Göbekli Tepe, the book you wrote, and some of your other research. But just before we sort of bring this to a close, just remind people regarding your website and like where they can connect with you and everything.
Yeah, you can go to aaronjudkins.com. It's AARONJUDKINS, aaronjudkins.com. And you can follow my research there. Anything that I'm doing, we're planning on a big trip over to Turkey in 2025. And we're going to hit all the old sites, including Göbekli Tepe. So we'll be doing that with Dr. Judd Burton and Derek and Sharon Gilbert from Skywatch TV. So it'll be open to the public. We'll have a big busload of people. If you want to come, we'll have the itinerary and the dates. When I get those, I'll put those up on the website, but you can follow everything there that I've done. So yeah, it's fascinating because um, it's been a while since I've been over to Turkey, and I did not get to go to Göbekli Tepe. This time we're going to get to. Not only that, we're going to hit Karahan Tepe, I think, as well. We're going to hit Cappadocia, maybe Ephesus. So it's going to be just a phenomenal trip that we're going to take. We're going to go out on the Black Sea. It's just going to be a great trip. So I invite you to come along with us.
Oh, I'd love to. I mean, I've been to quite a few countries myself. I served in Afghanistan. That's one country that's like not really a holiday destination, but the
No.
closest I've got to Turkey is my barber. He's from Turkey, so I've not actually
Yeah.
been there. But well, thanks for your time, Aaron. It's been brilliant. If you just stay on for 1 minute after I just bring this to a close now. So, guys, this is what this podcast is all about. I bring on people like Dr. Judkins, who has done research. You know, he goes out into the field. I've had other guests who do the same things. You know, they're not just making this stuff up. It's deeply researched, spent years doing it, and that's what this podcast is about. We're trying to get, you know, the truth out there, because the mainstream narrative on basically everything is a lie, including, you know, where we've come from, as Aaron's gone into on this episode today. So thanks again, Aaron. I'll
Yeah,
be
you're
back
welcome.
next
Thanks for
week,
having me.
guys. I'll be back next week with a new guest. I'm Paul, and this is Beyond the Paradigm.